Hello, my name is Carrie and I am the Holistic Health Consultant. I have worked in healthcare for almost a decade as a nurse practitioner, and I am a certified personal trainer. I truly believe in whole body, head to toe health, and that is what this is all about. This is the Holistic Health Hot Seat, and I'm so excited that you are here. I truly believe in empowering you with education and resources to make decisions about your health. I'll be interviewing women about their health journeys, health experiences, different healing modalities, and the research that they've done, giving you an idea of what might help you. So let's get started. Hello, and welcome to the Holistic Health Hot Seat. My name is Carrie, and I am the Holistic Health Consultant. And I am joined today via Zoom with Jennifer Lawrence, a productivity and systems expert. I'm really excited for the information that she's going to share with us today and about her journey of how she kind of got into the work that she does. So, Jennifer, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your business and how you got into this work?
Thanks, Carrie. I'm super excited to be here. So I am a productivity and systems expert. I come from 15 plus years of experience as an executive administrative assistant and project manager. So I had worked my way up through the administrative field. I started as an office clerk in a podiatry office, all the way up to becoming a chief of staff in a C-suite in a corporate environment. And I reached there and I said, what do I want to do next? And at that same time, a lot of my friends were starting businesses and were pinging me for, how do I build this? How do you suggest I do this? Do you even know how to set this up? And I realized that the skill set that I've built over 15 years has such a significant impact for entrepreneurs who don't have these resources at their fingertips. So I kind of want to place these resources at their fingertips. So I started a virtual assistant business that is now morphing into an online business manager business, which is super fun. But pairing with that, I do a ton of educational resources. So if you are not yet ready to hire someone, or you don't want to hire someone, or you're in a traditional work environment and you just want to learn how to do certain things, I have like webinars, courses, blog posts, all the things to help people learn how to not just like run things in an office environment, but also get a handle on their personal task lists. And, running lives that are easier because they have systems to support it.
Yeah, and I love that. And I love what you offer as far as like even your free stuff. I know that I benefit from it. And then when I did my 6-week stress management, you did a fantastic video for helping them with this overwhelming feeling. So I love that. What do you see as sort of the biggest issue for entrepreneurs and business women in general? Because I feel like a lot of the information we give entrepreneurs applies to business women. So what do you kind of see as sort of like the biggest issue in general that they kind of fall into, especially as they're starting out?
It's a great question. And I love this question because it's so like right there in our faces, is this idea of grinding and hustling. And it's funny that you also mentioned this happens for business women, because I saw this a lot in the corporate environment, is that we're told that the only way to be successful is to hustle, 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 hustle. We have glorified the grind. And the reality is that if I hate the term work smarter, not harder, but there is some truth to that, in that you need to find a way to work easier, because you could be grinding all day long and you're going to get the same amount of work done if you would have just like sat down and thoughtfully thought about how you're going to approach it, and you're going to do it in less time. And so this idea that you have to like grind through and you have to hustle and somehow that's going to get you ahead, which there is no ahead. You're running your own race. There's nobody to be in front of. And so the reality is that we've sold this culture of hustling to be successful. And the reality is that the number one way to be successful is just to be consistent. And it's consistent in any way that you choose to show up. So whether it's going to be consistently making content, and I don't mean that just in a social media way, I mean writing blog posts or writing newsletters or whatever it may be, or consistently providing great service to your customers, or consistently supporting your team, consistently, creating valuable and awesome high quality products. It's all about consistency. It doesn't mean you have to do it as fast as humanly possible.
Do you feel that that's the same issue as they scale, or do you think that they run into a new problem as they start to like grow and scale?
That when we start to scale, the problem is not only as you're in really deep if you've already been grinding and hustling, because as you start to scale, the problem then becomes of I need to DIY everything. And this is where you see particularly entrepreneur burnout. Because what they see is that like I'm now outgrowing my capabilities, I just need to work longer hours. So now we're sacrificing all the evenings and the weekends, and oh, this holiday, it's Christmas, I'm just going to answer a few emails or whatever it may be. And what you're doing is you're sacrificing your well-being. You're also sacrificing all of the foundational reasons why you chose to go into business for yourself. But then what we do is we say, I'm going to DIY all of this, and I need to keep doing it because I need to do it my way. And how else would, I don't even know how I'd hand this off to somebody. I don't even know what I'd ask them to do. I just know I need help. And suddenly you're overwhelmed by the sheer idea that you shouldn't be doing it yourself anymore, right? And so as we scale, the problem then becomes automation and delegation. And if you've been grinding and hustling, there's a good chance that you haven't developed systems that allow you to see where you can automate or delegate. If you slow down at the beginning and say, I'm going to do this thoughtfully and intentionally, and I'm going to actually design it a certain way, I'm going to create, and I'm not talking like you don't have to build a massive system. I'm just saying, make a checklist in Microsoft Word, and then every time you have to do it, print it out and check it off by hand. Like you don't have to approach this with this great CRM or a great task management tool or, the best email marketing system ever. You just start with a checklist, like make simple checklists. And then as you're working through that, you're like, oh, I don't really need to do this anymore and this anymore. I can either automate that or I can delegate it. So as you scale, you've already got your process in place. So it makes it super easy to say, now I have enough money or I have enough resources to bring somebody into this, and I already know where they fit. Mm-hmm. And what you're doing is creating an environment of ease all the way through, instead of being like, I'm in trouble, and now I'm in deep shit. Like, like who's going to come and be the elephant scooper for me? Nobody wants that job. And so you're by being super thoughtful and avoiding the grind to begin with, and avoiding this weird concept that you have to do everything yourself, you're going to be far more successful later on, and you're going to be happier, right? Because like nobody goes into entrepreneurship saying, I want to be more stressed than I was before.
And I think that I love that you talk about it in a sense of your well-being, because one of the things that I end up talking to clients about, especially when they're extremely successful business women, or they're just like brand new entrepreneurs, whatever end of the spectrum, it is so much about your health is your wealth. So not just saying like, okay, you make sure that you work out and you eat right, because that's true, but also, hey, how's your mental health? How is your capacity? How is this overwhelm? How is your stress? And what are the things that we can really logistically do to relieve that? And I think I come from a little bit more, like, I know we've had this conversation before, but I come from a little bit more of like the woo-woo side of like, okay, can you go outside and like move your body and sing and dance? And you're a little bit more like, okay, but what about the system? Like, what's the system that's in place? Both things very much help your mental well-being and your overall wellness, right?
Right. Well, and it's such a great point, because you're right. Like it's so funny. I don't crap on the woo-woo thing. I embrace it too. But like for me, you have to have them working in tandem, right? Like you can't just say, I'm going to manifest myself to a healthier relationship with my work, right? Just like I can't checklist my way to a good diet. You have to have both like the right mindset about it, but you also have to have the tactical skills to get there. And sometimes, for me, my meditation is in running. And sometimes that's either it doesn't do the job that day, I just got too much going on, or it's not accessible. I mean, it's Arizona. We hit 50 days straight of being over 110. I'm not going running outside. I'm going to die if I do that. So having other tools in your tool belt to help build that well-being balance, so that it is this whole body experience, right? That you're not neglecting things because you're picking either one avenue or the other. You can pick multiples that work for you and pair them all together. You should always have something super tactical and processes related in there to help keep you grounded, because everything else is really going to help serve like your stress and your mental state and, you know, your nutritional balance and all that. But you also have to have the system in place to also build the consistency in your life too, so that you can focus on all of those things. Because I have thoughtful systems in place in my life, I do have time to take a bath. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I do have time to go read a book when I just am like, I'm done, I'm capped out, right? That wouldn't be possible if I was stuck in this grind culture and I hadn't thoughtfully developed those systems that allow me to disengage.
Yeah, I love that. And I absolutely agree. And I know that, like you kind of already talked about, you use systems to like decrease that overwhelm and that burnout, that stress. And we kind of already talked about this idea of that then becoming sort of mental health support and creating well-being. What can you kind of walk us through quickly, like what it is you do with a client to kind of help build those things for them?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great question. So when it comes to my clientele and anybody that I coach, I do take like one-on-one coaching for people who are just in a state of overwhelmed. I should call it like rescue overwhelm or something, because most people come to me and they say, I just need help with my productivity. And what the reality is that they've become buried in the avalanche and they don't really know where to go, right? They've lost all sense of direction and navigation and they just need some help. Or they know that they've gotten themselves there in the first place. They're like, I walked straight into that mess. So what I typically do with people is we first start talking about what are your natural reactions to getting things added to your task list. Like, how do you actually react to it in an actionable way, not in a stress way? Do you write it down? Where do you write it down? Where do you hold everything? And inevitably, what everybody tells me, I kid you not, I've not yet had one coaching client that writes things down in one place. They grab whatever's nearby. They've got this task management tool. They also use their inbox as a task list. They've got Post-its over there. One time they wrote it on a receipt in their kitchen. Yeah, I see you, Carrie. So the reality is that like, this is not uncommon. And so it's so funny when I like start coaching people and they say it with like such shame. And you're like, literally every person I've coached on this does this. So you are in good company. So the first step to helping anyone with their overwhelm or their productivity is finding the singular system that works best for their natural instincts and the way they live their life. So a lot of the tools that we're being told are the best tools for this or the best tools for that may not actually match with who you are as a person and the way your life actually operates, right? Like, it'd be great to have a perfectly constructed task management tool, and I have it on my iPad and I have it on my iPhone and everything's connected in the cloud. But the reality is, and I have it right next to me, I like to write things down. So like, it doesn't make sense for me to have this super robust tool if that's just not the way I do things. So I work with them through that. And then we talk about all of these other little leaks that are happening. What are you doing that you think you should or shouldn't be doing? And we really start to dig in. When it comes to my OBM clients, the next thing we go to is how do your workflows actually work? And that's when we dig into what does your client experience look like? Once they've come into the sales funnel and you've booked them, like they're yours, whether you're selling a product or a service, what is their experience going forward? And that's where a lot of entrepreneurs start flailing and getting overwhelmed because they haven't actually made a system of that process. And that's where I start building in automations and all of that to make life easier. So if you're coming in as like somebody who's just a general coaching client and not an OBM client, what I teach you is how to identify those in little bite sizes in your life. So if you think about it, the great thing that I tell people is like, when you go out to run errands pre-COVID, when you go out to run errands, maybe even so more now with COVID, you wouldn't just go out and say, I need to go to the post office and then go to the post office and come home. And then, oh, I need to go to Target and then come home. And then, oh, by the way, I need to go to Walgreens and go out to Walgreens and come home. What you do is you say, I need to go to the post office, Target, and Walgreens. This one is further away, so I'm going to go to the first one away. And oh, by the way, I'm picking up frozen food from Target, so that one needs to be last. People naturally think this way. You need to think that way about all the different things that you do in your life. And it's not as cumbersome as it actually sounds. So when I'm working with people on their task management and their productivity, I try to relate it back to things that you were already taught how to do, and try not to overcomplicate it, because that's the one thing that we're doing that's absolutely killing our culture, is we're making it way too hard. You know, by forcing people into task management tools and forcing them to approach work a certain way that isn't necessarily aligned with who they are as a person. And then also teaching them that embracing the new is the way to go. What we're doing is we're putting way too much pressure on people. Like if your way of doing things is to just throw everything in the dishwasher, and no, there is not a right way to load the dishwasher. If your way of doing things is to load everything in the dishwasher and hit go and walk away, then it's fine. You don't have to hand wash those dishes, right? So like that's kind of the philosophy that I work from when helping people, because that permission to do work the way that it feels best for you is usually the first step in releasing the overwhelm. Because so many people are trying to fit into some sort of structure of success that has been sold to them in some way, whether it's something they saw on LinkedIn, or, you know, their favorite influencer on Instagram swears by it, or something like that. We're constantly being sold solutions without thinking, is this the right solution for me? And I know you feel this a lot when it comes to like nutrition, right? Like a lot of people say, you know, I've heard this diet or this diet is the best one. Which one do you think? And you're like, well, I've seen those videos, Carrie. I watch them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I that's actually one of the things, because we've Zoomed before, right? That you've actually said to me that like clicked for me so much was what you were talking about. Like, if you enjoy writing things down, don't put it on a computer or an iPad. And for me, that was so very true. Like, I love to write. I love to have a journal. I love to have a piece of paper accessible to me. And I kept trying to like shove it into the digital world of like, no, it all has to be written or put into a Word document or into like some sort of PDF, which I still don't even know how to create, you know, like, so it's like, there's all these things that like, I still don't even know how to do, because it's just not my jam. It's not who I am. And I think that that's so important. And it's absolutely the same with health. Like, we have to stop telling people like there's one way and you need to fit into this box. It's like, no, screw that. Like, there's a zillion different ways we can do things in business, in life, in health, that you would just have to find the one that works for you, is going to be sustainable for you in both facets of life.
And it gets back to that concept or that theme of consistency, right? Like, if I tell you that, you know what, from today on, you're only going to put your tasks into Trello. And you're like, first of all, I've never even seen Trello, right? And so now I have to learn a new system, and I've got to move all my stuff over, and then you're already just overwhelmed at the idea. That's no way to move through life, right? Like if immediately you have this overwhelming sense of resistance, that should be a good enough sign that like you're not on the right path. And I always tell people, like my big slogan is, there is no best way to get work done, just the best way for you. And I wish everybody approached their life that way, because often, I mean, we've all done it. We've all searched for, you know, some sort of article with a hack in it, or what is the best this. And the reality is that you have to start with yourself first. And that's where I get into that woo-woo thing, right? Like, you have to start with what feels good and what feels natural to you first, to even build a sustainable and consistent system that isn't more work for you, right? That's the other thing that we do when we're trying to fit into somebody else's ideal. I mean, think of that anytime you've tried a crash diet, right? And you're like, oh God, now I have to track all this, and I can't do this, and I can't just eat this, and now I have to work out this many times. And like, suddenly you have a to-do list when you're just trying to be healthier. Right. Like, instead of just saying, you know what, the next time I go to my fridge, instead of soda, I'm going to grab a water.
Right.
Right. So it's the same thing when you're taking on like productivity stuff and all that. It's just start following what feels good and what feels natural and doesn't feel like more work to you, because I guarantee if it's more work, you're not going to do the work that actually needs to get done.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I love your approach. And I think that it does, in it inherently, it actually does create a better sense of well-being and mental health, because like you said, you're not shoving yourself into somebody else's expectation. And I think that there are some business coaches, not all, but there are some business coaches that is how they coach, is that you need to use X, Y, and Z, and you need to do it this way. And I know I found myself almost falling into that too. And that's when I was having the burnout and the fatigue and the stress and the overwhelm. And it's like, none of that is good for who I am as a person. How can I then support a business? And so I love that is your approach. So yeah, one of the other things I want to talk to you about, because I think that you have just like a wonderful sort of, finger on the pulse of this, is that you're also a mom as well. And your youngest just turned 2, right?
No, my oldest just turned 2.
Oldest just turned 2. So how old is your youngest?
8 months.
8 months. I saw that you had a 2-year-old birthday, and I'm like, that kid's not 2 yet. So perfect. I was not wrong. I was like, no. Wasn't that long ago?
No, so I have Cameron, who's 2, and Tyler, who's 8 months. He was born in January.
Which is just incredible. And then like your business is also exploding. So how are you kind of handling all of that, sort of using your own systems or your own support, right?
Not well. No, I'm just kidding. It's been a challenge, it's been interesting to be going through COVID. COVID has been a blessing in a way of challenging. We all kind of get like set in our ways, and we have what works for us. And what can easily happen is this agility muscle that we all have, where we've built not just resilience, but our ability to react to change in a way that is positive, kind of gets a little fatigued and a little, let's be frank, like underused and lazy when you work for yourself, because you incite change. So it's kind of like when you're driving in a car and like you take a turn too fast, and like the person in the seat next to you is like, holy shit. And you're like, oh, it wasn't that bad, because you're directing it, right? You're in charge. And so COVID has kind of put me in the passenger seat, and I'm like, oh, whoa, like I'm really not reacting as well as I thought I was. So being a mom is this whole other level of being a business owner, right? Like it is just, you have like, a lot of people say like my business is my baby, and I can tell you right now, it's not. Like, it's not. Like, it could be something that you love and you nurture, but it's more like your dog. It's not your baby. And it's so much work having to compartmentalize who you are as a person when you're a mom, any type of mom, whether you're a stay-at-home mom or a working mom or a business owner mom, or even a caregiver, to be honest with you, any type of caregiver, even if it's not a human, maybe you've got a special needs dog that is like super needy, like that compartmentalization of your life and your mental state, your emotions, and realizing that your capacity for each of those actually sits in different buckets. And so they can get worn out in different ways. So being a business owner and a mom, especially with 2 under 2, because I'm insane, has been an interesting exploration of myself. And as I've developed these systems, I have found that the number one advice that I gave myself that I love to give other people is to embrace the idea of iterations. So as you are developing different systems, processes, service, products, all that sort of stuff, is understand that nothing's going to be perfect the first time around. And so you have to give yourself the grace to just go and address some things later, right? Like go with the best viable product at that time and then know that you're going to address things at a later date. Because as a mom, my ability to lay out a perfect groundwork every day is quite low. I could have a beautifully planned week, day, whatever, and I could get a call from daycare that says, by the way, your kid's got a fever, you need to come pick him up. And so there's this idea that you always have to be ready for the unexpected. And that's why having the systems is so important too, because having those systems in place that allow me to extract myself from my business world and go be a mom and fully be present as being a mom is one of the best reasons I've seen have moms build business systems that support them, because there have been times where I have gotten that call from daycare that says, by the way, we need you to come pick up the boys, and they're actually sick, and he's 2, so like it's not like I can put him on an iPad and say, here's a bucket if you need to throw up, right? Like they need to be held, they need to be with them. And so I have certain systems in place, like the way I manage my calendar, the way I communicate with my clients, that allows me to basically pull the plug on my day, knowing that everything's going to be okay.
And like that must be like just such a huge peace of mind, I think, for you as well. And so I think encouraging other women, whether it's entrepreneur women or career women, I think that even like just career women outside of the home have to start embracing some of those systems, some of those same things. And I think for me, when I'm talking to people about their mental health and coming from a holistic approach, I definitely coach around, okay, let's build out what the day looks like, and where are you not willing to negotiate your time. And so I think for moms, it does come down a lot to like, this time with my kids, even when they're not ill, right? This is a non-negotiable. And so is that something that you kind of approach with your women as well?
It's so funny that you talk about in the sense of a day, like you look at your day and what time is non-negotiable, because my number one tip for people is, if you want to feel more in control of your time, and so that you can make thoughtful, informed decisions about what time you have available, this is a great boundary setting technique when you have people who are constantly adding things to your to-do list, is to actually schedule your to-dos into your day. And that sort of sense of time blocking, right? Because that system allows you to lay out your day, and you set these boundaries, and you make sure your priorities are being addressed, and that you're making sure you actually take a lunch, or that nobody schedules into your parenting time or whatever it may be. But that's also the same tool that enables me to step away from my business and pull the plug on my day, because I know that all of those things that are on my calendar, I now know that I need to find somewhere else. And I know exactly how much time I need to move, or exactly how much, what's going to need to be sacrificed in place of that. So if I'm like, hey, this really needs to get done, and needs to get done tomorrow, what am I moving off my plate tomorrow to get it done? And so that pre-planning, which actually doesn't take as long as it sounds like it should, enables me to be a great mom, because I can say all of this, of course, your kid being sick, everything pales in comparison to that, but it allows me not to be stressed. Because then I can go pick up my son from daycare, and I can be that fully present mom that's not answering emails or, super stressed, like, oh, you like ruined my day or anything like that. Like, I'm able to adjust into like superhero mom mode. And sure, maybe that night I'll address a few emails, or while he's sleeping, I'll be typing over his head, because inevitably he's across me, typing over his head, answering a few emails. But I already feel in control of something that easily could have spiraled. But also, speaking to the like having non-negotiable time, that's something that I always encourage people to do as well, is this, and it goes back to that grind and hustle culture, right? You have to have time where you're a person. I don't care how passionate you are about your business and what you do, and that you've shifted out of, work to live to work mode, or whatever it may be. But like, I really love what I do, but I also really love like being able to sit on my couch and read for 30 minutes every day. So you have to find that balance, and the best way to do it is actually to block it out in your calendar and insist upon it, right? And learn to live and die by your calendar in a way that isn't oppressive. Like, I'm not saying like put things in there and be like, this is inflexible, this is who I am today. What I'm saying is to use it as your guidepost. And I'm going to go on a total tangent about this because I love this stuff. Yeah. But one of the great things about that too is when you plan out your day and you build a schedule, you eliminate what I call the decision-making gap. And it's a lot like meal planning. So I don't know, Carrie, exactly how you feel about meal planning, but when we don't meal plan, we get to the end of the day and we have that horrible conversation with our partner of, what do you want for dinner? right? And then you negotiate back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And inevitably you just go get fast food, right? Because we think it's faster than actually cooking something, which is also a great lie we've been sold. So, right? Like it takes you 20 minutes to go get the fast food, or you could have like made a salad or a sandwich. So, I digress. Anyways, so this also happens with our tasks and our priorities. If we don't plan out our days and we don't say, okay, I'm going from this time to this time, I'm going to do this project. From this time to this time, I'm going to do this project. What ends up happening is you get in front of your computer that day and you look at your to-do list, and inevitably you're now in the decision-making gap where you can make an emotional decision. Whatever you're like, I don't have the brain space for this today. I'm just not going to do it. Or, oh, this one seems easy, I'm just going to cross it off my list. And so then you start doing all the easy things to cross off your list. And I'm not a huge proponent for do the hardest thing first, but I do believe that you should do your highest priority first. And so the more gaps you have in your day, the more likely you're going to get to the end of the day and be like, what the hell did I do today? What did I accomplish today? Because you didn't actually get the things off your list. And you also have no visual to look back on and be like, oh, that's what I did today. Yeah. So by having everything pre-planned in your calendar, you actually have a plan to approach things, and you eliminate those emotional decision-making gaps that completely derail us. Because I can't tell you how many times I'm useless in the afternoon. I get to like 3 p.m. and I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to do anything. And so if I didn't pre-plan my afternoons, I would get to like 2:30 and I'd be like, oh, if I start that project now though, I mean, gosh, you know what? I'm just going to go swimming. That's what I would do, because that's what feels good at that moment, as opposed to making sure that I'm approaching everything in my calendar and actually getting things off my list.
Yeah. And I love that. And I love the comparison to meal planning, because I like meal planning in the sense of like creating a plan for you that will nourish you. And I think it's the same thing. Are you picking the things that are going to nourish you? Because sometimes you can talk yourself into fast food, right? But then if you always stop and say, will this nourish me? I mean, 9 times out of 10, it's gonna be no. There will be those exceptions. I do feel sometimes where you're like, yeah, I just want something, I want something different. I want to eat out. I want to have that.
I haven't had a hamburger in 2 months. God, I just want a hamburger.
I mean, I've never had that urge, but I get it. I get that sometimes there are those moments where you're like, actually what would nourish me right now is having just a little piece of chocolate. Well, if you've prepared yourself all day and nourished yourself well all day, the little piece of chocolate can stop there. And I think it's the same thing, that you're creating that same support system. So when you get to those times at the end of your day, you're like, oh no, I did all of these things. So sitting down on the couch and reading for 30 minutes supports me, because I supported myself throughout the day. So it is absolutely comparable. And I love that comparison, because it also clicks for me.
Yeah. And it also keeps you out of that phase of overindulgence, right? Like if you are not constantly grinding, you don't also get into what I call procrastination paralysis, where I don't know, there are a lot of people, there's 2 different reactions to overwhelm. Either people hide in their little hole and they don't want to do anything because somehow it's all magically going to go away, or they'll deal with it when they're mentally ready. And there are the people who grind through it. Both are super unhealthy. Mm-hmm. If you find a way to get to the middle and say, you know what, I'm feeling super worn out today. I have like 2 things I need to get done. So I'm going to schedule those in the morning, or I just don't feel up for it this morning, but I know in the middle of the day, I'll probably get super motivated. Then it allows you to balance rather than grinding through the day or just taking the whole day off. Right. It allows you to create some sort of balance that keeps you out of that overindulgence, right? Like if you never allow yourself that little piece of chocolate, guess what? You're eating a whole damn Hershey's bar the next time you want chocolate, right? Like,
yeah. And I love the sort of, because when we talk about productivity and systems, the first thing that comes to my head is actually like the hustle and the grind, right? But what you're doing is sort of like reframing it to say, no, we can use these things to actually find you a much easier place, but not easier in the sense of like, it's all going to just be easy peasy, but like this sense of ease and flow is coming in from creating systems. And I think that's really a valuable tool. Speaking of systems, with 2 kiddos and a husband, what is sort of, How do you utilize your support system?
Oh, support system, how? Like my friends, like my actual systems, like my husband.
I think any system as you're, because like you just, I mean, 8 months ago had a baby. So that didn't mean that your business stopped.
No, actually, it was my most profitable month.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that your now 2-year-old stopped needing you or want. So how did you sort of create, I guess you would almost have to maybe, and tell me if I'm wrong, create almost new systems within your support system and within your business. So how did that kind of look for you?
It was a mess. No, I'm just kidding. It's like, it goes back to that concept of iterations, right? Like you kind of try things out and accept the fact that it may not work. So I'm a big, like I just said, I'm a big fan of like scheduling my days. And so that was actually how I was able to stay on top of my business and also still be present with the newborn. Is I said, okay, I have this newborn, but these people have these projects coming up. So I'm going to set aside blocks of time for this to work. And then in 2 weeks, like the relationship and the needs of the newborn, who's now technically an infant, is a little different. And so I was constantly in this flow of like reapproaching my day. And then the other thing is also being hyper communicative about where I was at with people. So not just my clients, but also with my husband, about saying, you know, I'm in this place where like, I'm trying to balance too much. Can you help me talk through it? And kind of redesigning and identifying areas for automation that I probably wouldn't have used before. To give you an idea, I'm not a big fan of the scheduling apps. I think it takes the human interaction out of it, even though it's a pain in the ass. I'd rather have the human conversations with people. But during a very small window after I had my son, I instituted one just because it made my life a ton easier, right? And I even told people, though, this is just a temporary patch while I'm tending to a newborn. But also, you know, communicating with my clients about, you know, these are the expectations for this week. And everybody knew that it was going to be a progressive change as I got not only into having a new child, but then also becoming a mother of 2. And then also my partnership now shifting from being parents of 1 to parents of 2, which also changes your partnership dynamic. And so there's a lot shifting at one time. And I found that by focusing on the changes in my system, it was a great way to ground myself and consistently stay in touch with me as a person. Because it's so easy to get lost in the feedings, the diapers, the sleep, the feedings, the diapers, the sleep, the feedings, the diapers, the sleep. And by having something else to anchor me to say, what is working, what is not working, and to embrace those iterations and change things around, that allowed me to be much more agile as a mother of 2. Because to be frank with you, it's kind of a shit show. So like,
I would think so. Like, that really doesn't surprise me. I was like,
yeah. One, especially like figuring out how to be a parent to 1 it's a whole new world. It gets very Aladdin. Like the whole world has opened up to you. You're challenged in so many different ways. And then you get it down with 1, and then you introduce this whole other person into your family that looks an awful lot like the first one, except they do everything different. And now you also have to have the negotiation on who addresses what, and how do we communicate with each other on issues with both kids. And in the moment where 2 of them are screaming, how do we approach that? And, now the logistics of getting 2 small ones out of the car at the same time, like it is like it's new. Everything's new. And it's not new every day, but it certainly is new often enough where you have to look back and say, what is working, what is not. And so for anybody who's a parent that is either, in business in a traditional role or running their own business, that is a huge tool to just be reflective at least once a week and say what is working, what is not, and not be afraid to make those little tweaks. Because when you make a plan, you're not married to it. Like when you make a plan, you're not putting it in stone and like that's like the way you're going to approach everything for all of time, so it better can work, right? Like what it actually is you're laying a foundation that you then say, okay, we're going to start here. And then as we move forward, maybe we're going to tweak this, we're going to take this off, we're going to move this. But if you don't have that foundation, you're going to be flailing for all of time. So you have to actually put something in place for you to actually be able to pivot on. And so as we've made that transition, and then also then COVID hit, that was such an important groundwork for us to have, because at that point we had been parents or dual parents for about 3 months. And it was then, I've told this story to a few people, and I've talked about it on my Instagram a few times, that when COVID hit, it was 1 week after both kids had finally been in daycare. And so I had finally reached that gateway of like, okay, they're both in daycare. I finally have my days back. I've finally been cleared to work out again, because I had 2 C-sections. And so longer recovery time. And I was like, oh, everything's coming back. And then COVID was like, that's cute. So it was devastating. And had we not already had these systems in place to support our household, I probably honestly would have probably spiraled into some postpartum depression, because I had nothing to anchor me and say, I can make this work. Let's identify what's not working and what's working well. And that became and honestly, that conversation happened every 2 days with me and my husband at the beginning of COVID. We would, before we went to bed, we would say, okay, what went well today? What didn't? And what do we need to change? And it was a very productive conversation, and it helped my husband feel like he was really supporting me during a time where it is kind of hard to support new mothers, because we're not always sure how we feel. And so to have that support and have those conversations was a great system to have in place as well.
Yeah. And I think you talked about, you called it hyper communicative.
Hyper communicative. Yes.
In all reality, we can call it hyper communicative, but I think it's really just communication.
Yeah.
But we've become a place in a society where maybe we don't communicate enough, and in particular our feelings, and in particular women who have just had babies, because it is sort of this idea that it should all be wonderful and fantastic and what a blessing. And it is, all of those things are true. It is a blessing. It is fantastic. The baby is a miracle, but there are times when mama is not okay. And we've created almost this imbalance of like, if baby's okay, mom is okay, but that may not be true. And so creating a place where you could communicate with your partner and say, here's what's working, here's what's not working, here's how I'm feeling, is just tremendous. And I know we've kind of talked about this separately, about sort of that idea of like, hey, I'm not okay, hey, this isn't great. So I'd love for you to speak a little bit on that as well, as sort of part of your overall journey as being a mom and an entrepreneur and all of those things.
Yeah. So when I was pregnant with my first son, I was in a traditional corporate environment, having a traditional corporate job. And so as I started to balloon out, everybody likes to ask that question of how are you doing? And it became very quickly apparent to me that nobody actually cared how I was doing. People were actually asking either out of a sense of societal obligation or, it's polite. But I found that people are not comfortable with even a remotely honest answer to how you're doing. And I think a lot of this gets back to what we've sold parenting or pregnancy should look like. We use the term "you're glowing" to like pregnant moms, and they're like, yeah, it's sweat. And so I am not a big complainer when things are uncomfortable. I'm just very matter of fact. So when I would say, my back's really hurting today, but other ways I'm great, people are like, oh, it'll be fine, it'll get better. And I'm like, okay, dude, first of all, I always love the line, what is it from Friends? Like, no uterus, no opinion. But it's very, people would love to like placate you for, whatever, feedback that you had that wasn't in line with what they have decided pregnancy should look like. I found that like pregnancy projecting is a big thing too, with like women to women, where somebody would have like a hard pregnancy. So the fact that you just had some back problems. Well, that's nothing compared to me. Or this stressed me out during my pregnancy, so you must be stressed out too. And so people would try and push their stress on you too. And so what I found during my pregnancy is that it was very difficult to feel like I was having authentic relationships with people or authentic support. And it was the number one reason why I avoided mommy groups and mommy vlogs, because it became a game of comparison, which I wasn't a fan of. My pregnancy is going better or my pregnancy is going worse, which I don't know why you would ever have that argument. I don't know why your pregnancy experience devalues mine. But also when I wanted people who, when they were going to ask me how I was feeling, that they had a genuine invested interest in how I was actually doing, because that was the sort of connection I needed while I was pregnant. I didn't have anything that would be deemed complications while I was pregnant with my first son, but it was remarkably uncomfortable. He was transverse through my entire pregnancy, so he was actually sideways. Which is, imagine somebody sticking a stick in you and turning it sideways, and then your abs separating, everything inside you moves. So the kid being sideways, everything's not where it should be. And it was remarkably painful. It was really, really, really painful, because you can also imagine every time he kicked or punched me, it was where it shouldn't be. There was no soft tissue around it. So I was in chiropractic appointments twice a week, in physical therapy twice a week, and then I was seeing my doctor once a week. So I was always in the doctor's office. I was always in pain. And so when it came time for him to come out, I actually was not given the option to do natural birth because of his positioning and everything. I had to go for a C-section. So it was during my maternity leave with him that I decided I wanted to work for myself. My ambition finally caught up with me post-pregnancy. I was like, you know what I want to do? And you look at that little face and you're like, what type of mom do I want to be? How do I feel like I can best support my child? And I grew up in a small town. My mom never worked more than 10 minutes away from our house. And so for me, it was, I wanted, living in a large urban area, it was really hard for me to swallow that I was 45 minutes away from my kids every day. And so I was like, I think it's time for me to work for myself. And that was paired with the, what do I want to do next conversation. And when you're in your postpartum glow, it seems like a really good idea to start a business. So at the end of my maternity leave, I quit my job and I started my business, and I was in business 3 months and I was pregnant again.
Oh my gosh.
And that one was a little bit of a surprise. As the universe works, my husband and I had actually decided we were going to wait a little bit longer. We had originally planned to have the kids close together, and we were like, oh, we're going to wait. And then boom, I'm pregnant. So the universe has a funny way of working that out. And so then also running a business while having a child under the age of 1 and also being pregnant, I gotta tell you, that was one of the most challenging things I've ever experienced, because when you work in a workplace and you have a boss that's like, you know what, you look really exhausted, maybe you should head home today. That's one thing. It's so much harder to give yourself that talk. It's so much harder to justify not putting in a few extra hours because you can just lay up with your big old belly on the couch with a laptop and somehow that's a break. So it was really, I would actually say that being pregnant and having a toddler, or at the time he was considered an infant, I guess, while running a business was much more challenging than having 2 children at the same time. And it was very unexpected. But as you get through this, and everybody knows this, after you have kids, suddenly everybody's got advice on what you should be doing, how you should be raising your children. Most of it is very well intentioned, I will tell you that. It becomes a challenge because, again, you get back to the, well, you shouldn't be complaining because we've all been through it. And one of my most hated statements is, well, just wait until. And you're like, well, thank you for invalidating what I'm experiencing right now. And so that was a big sticking point for me. And then also venturing into this world of entrepreneurship where a lot of people don't know how to relate to you. a lot of our aunts, uncles, parents, everybody was raised that you go work for a company and you put in your 20 years and you retire. And that's just the framework that they, you know, served under. And that's just the way it is. And so when you launch out on an entrepreneur journey, there's not a whole lot of people who understand the journey you're on. And so now I'm in this motherhood journey where I'm always supposed to be happy and grateful that I have this beautiful, healthy children and everything's great. And then also I've started this business where people don't really want to ask questions because they really don't know what the hell you're talking about. And so you find yourself in this weird wedge. Mm-hmm. And so you're like desperately seeking other moms that like know what's going on. And the reality is you just need to find people who are sensitive to it. They don't need to have lived your experience to be empathetic towards you, which I've been very blessed to find. But it is challenging as a mom because you have all this advice and then you have people who don't know how to relate to you as a mom, but also don't know how to relate to you as a business owner. And so it gets a little hairy and it gets a little tough. It gets really tough. And so it's hard not to fall into that too often.
Well, I like that you talked about sort of being really intentional with who you allowed in and what advice you allowed in, because I do think that that is super important in all areas of life. Yeah. Right. But also in particular for women who have businesses and are raising children, you shouldn't ask me for advice. Right. I mean, you can, and you can take what you want, but you need to be really intentional with the fact that the realization is I don't have children. So the advice that I'm giving you is different than the advice that maybe a mom would give you. And I had another gal on, Angie, who started her own mom blog. And a big piece of that was really finding a place where she could explore and talk about these other feelings that she had. And like her first pregnancy, she talked about not knowing what to do and sort of this idea of completely overwhelmed and having to put the baby down and just like not knowing. Right. And I think that what she found was she also had to be really intentional with like her relationships. Right. Mm-hmm. And now she's into her second pregnancy. She has a great partner. She has this good family dynamic. And it is all about, I truly believe, finding, and you kind of did this motion when you were talking about finding people. And I think that that's such a good way to look at it though, is that there's a lot of options, but we have to really zone ourselves in to like, okay, whose advice am I going to take? Whose advice am I really going to value and really allow to potentially affect my life, right? It's the same for women who don't have children. Like, I'm not always going to necessarily ask a woman who has children for advice on the way that I do things because our experiences are different.
Yeah, the first and foremost is the advice that I give a lot of new entrepreneurs is the first and best way to protect your mental state is to accept and start working to identify that not every person is going to be your person to talk about specific things. I have two very, very, very close friends. One works out all the time and the other doesn't. So I don't talk to this friend about my exercise and I had this great run. And by the way, I found this great race and I'm going to go get that medal because I'm a total hardware junkie. I go talk to this friend. The same thing is about motherhood. And it doesn't have to be a friend who has kids, but it could be somebody who is empathetic and understands you as a person and isn't going to try and be a fixer and isn't going to try and be a one-upper and is going to understand the difference between I'm in an emotional state, not an action state. Same thing with your business. My best friend, she's been my best friend since we were teenagers. She doesn't understand how the hell I do what I do. She's like, I know you're really good at what you do. I read your blog. I don't know how you do what you do. And she's also not interested. And that's okay because I will actually text her. This actually happened last week. I texted her and I said, just need you to celebrate with me. Here's the headline of what happened. If you want to know more, I'll tell you later. And I got the Boston champagne gif. She was excited for me and I got what I needed out of that exchange. But she's not the person I turn to when I need the validation excitement. When I text that other person and I say, this is what happened. And they're like, oh my gosh, that's huge for your business. Things are going to change for you. I'm so excited. You're on your way to your goals, all that sort of stuff. So you need to take that approach in your life that not every person can be your person for everything. And I'm trying to remember the other thing that I just totally had like pregnancy brain, as we discussed. But yeah, it's really interesting how as a mom and as a person, you have to start figuring out that there is no one size fits all for literally anything in your life. And as a mom, I've built more acceptance of that because I have to. And I would say that before I became a mom, I was less resistant to that. But it is this idea that like, you have to find your people. You really do. And you have to find those people that are going to be open to supporting you.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that.
yeah.
Thank you so much. This has been an amazing talk. We kind of went all over, which I really always enjoy. Really quickly, will you tell them where to find you?
Yeah. So I'm on almost every social media platform as Jen Lawrence Co., including Pinterest. So I'm on Pinterest, LinkedIn, and Instagram, Facebook, all of that, Jen Lawrence Co. Or you can go to my website at jenlawrence.co, not com. I can't afford to get the .com because Jennifer Lawrence, the actress. One day, that's one of my goals, is to pay the like 4-figure domain fee for the jenlawrence.com. But so in the meantime, that's where you can find me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.